Archie Giant Series 467. Once again, we see Hilda arriving at her door looking worse than usual because of an accident when she was flying in the winter. Sabrina expresses concern, and she says she smashed her best broom. She could just repair it with magic. Once again, Hilda got crashed into by Santa's sleigh. This seems like a very redundant story so far, so it doesn't get original until Hilda says it's not Christmas Eve. Sabrina says it's probably a time check of his to make sure he could get the whole job done on Christmas Eve. That's brilliant. That'd help explain why he'd always succeed at it, because he does practice runs. Ambrose says they have to go buy and wrap gifts. Sabrina's excited to go with him. For some reason, Hilda was feeling good enough, even after crashing into Santa's sleigh, that she uncharacteristically didn't bother them by asking why they won't just create gifts with magic, and asking why they're even celebrating Christmas. Instead, Hilda's so glad Sabrina's a good kid. And by that, she must mean she's glad she cares about her because she's opposed to her actually being good. That she uses magic to zap up a Christmas tree to save her hours of work. But she should know that if Sabrina's going to the trouble of wasting time buying gifts with Ambrose, then she won't appreciate her doing this and creating gifts for them. At least she cared enough to do that, though. She looks through a gift catalog that came in the mail before creating gifts, so at least she's trying to come up with good gifts. She then zaps a wreath on the door. It's better than her refusing to celebrate Christmas with them. But go figure, when Sabrina comes home, she cries, in an over-the-top cartoonish way where she says, "Wah." And that usually happens to tell the audience that the character is being ridiculous and should be seen as a comedy figure. Ambrose lampshades that after all the centuries Hilda's been around, she should know better than to take all the fun out of Christmas. Why would she cry about this? She could just zap away what Hilda created in seconds, so there's no reason to care. I'm sure there's a lot of people other than them that would appreciate having to not do all of that work. Hilda reluctantly teleports it all away, and we see Sabrina happy again right away, thankfully. So we see Sabrina help Ambrose bring in the tree, and Hilda's nice enough to make Christmas cookies the hard way. Despite her hating that there's pine needles all over the rug and gift wrapping and ribbons everywhere, she still finds it more satisfying this way. It's not because Christmas has its own kind of magic, it's because it's more satisfying to do something the harder way. In Memory Lane Refrain, Hilda sees a person dressed like Santa near a cauldron with the word "give" above it, and she says it reminds her of her youth. Somehow, Sabrina thinks she's talking about Santa, when a witch won't be sentimental about that. She's of course talking about the black pot, which reminds her of her first witch's brew. I guess because it was made in one that looked exactly like this. Otherwise, why wouldn't it just remind her of potions and cauldrons in general? It was lucky she was reminded of something that far back. In the next story, Harvey and Sabrina act really optimistic about Christmas while walking around, and what Harvey likes most about it is no school, which annoys Sabrina. She's also annoyed that he talks about Christmas dinner too. Since when is she so easily annoyed for no reason? He's being relatable here. What's the problem? He even raves about Christmas cookies and candies. What else does she want? She should just be grateful he didn't just say he liked the gifts. He finally says that the greatest thing about Christmas is the gifts. Then why didn't he mention it until now? That's what everyone would think right away. Sabrina's completely unsympathetic and impossible to relate to, calling her boyfriend greedy when you can't really blame him for looking forward to Christmas presents. And even someone who can zap up whatever she wants would appreciate presents because they come from the heart. So she'd look forward to them too. Instead, she picks a fight with him over it. He admits that he's greedy too. She should be admiring him for his honesty. She thinks he's just selfish and decides to be selfish herself by abusing her magic so that he'll get flung around with it and almost hit some rocks, which could have killed him. Why is she such a monster in this story? You'd think she'd at least explain what she thought he was missing before this. I assume she means that she thought spending time with family was the real meaning of Christmas. But if his family isn't that great to spend time with, that's not his fault. Sabrina complains to Ambrose about greediness in Harvey. Ambrose says that Harvey's a great kid to insist that all of his gifts be in cash to spend on toys for the kids at the kids' hospital. How would he know this when Sabrina doesn't? Wouldn't Harvey want to tell Sabrina this to brag? Why would he refer to gifts that he's greedy about as gifts instead of just explaining this to Sabrina right away, when it was obvious just by looking at her that she was mad at him? It'd make more sense if he was lied to. But then why didn't Harvey tell the same lie to Sabrina? Harvey apparently does this thing every year. This comes out of nowhere to make up an excuse for Sabrina to kiss him. That was a sweet ending, but not nearly enough to make up for the tedium I was just put through by Sabrina. In the next story, some kids tell Sabrina Merry Christmas, she says it back, and appreciates how respectful they are. And then she gets hit by a snowball for no reason. Lucky for them, she's not in a bad enough mood to punish them with her magic this time. She fortunately smiles and thinks she'll just have to be more careful the next time. Then a snowplow blows some snow onto her. Somehow the guy driving it doesn't apologize even though he says Merry Christmas to her. Luckily, she doesn't punish him for that either. Well, I couldn't blame her too much for giving someone karma. It's important to have her not abuse her magic every time someone wrongs her, in order to make it clear that she's supposed to be a nice, good person. She zaps up an invisible shield in front of her again. But somehow she didn't make it tall enough, so she gets hit by snow anyways. This would have never happened to her if she wasn't walking outside in the snow for no reason. Why doesn't she just warp home? I think this story had no reason to happen. At first she plans on getting revenge, but then she sees a friendly neighbor shoveling snow and is nice enough to not decide to punish him because he didn't even realize what he did. She doesn't call him out on it to get an apology and make him feel guilty either, which is good of her, but I would have liked to see him apologize. She considerately says Pop-Tay might need some help, and he says there's too much snow on his business's roof and he hopes it won't tear her awning. Sabrina thinks he's the first person today who didn't clobber her with snow. What, her aunts and Ambrose did it to her too? I guess they like throwing snowballs at her too, but that's out of character for Zelda. It's very predictable that when Sabrina uses magic to melt the snow too close to it, it splashes onto her. She could have easily just pointed to make the snow disappear instead. She finally gets the idea to go home and stay there. Never mind, she looks out the window at night and says Merry Christmas to the world. So snow falls off the roof onto her. In the next story, we see one of Santa's little helpers teleport to a house and he's holding a note and says he'll see if Sabrina keeps her room clean and whatnot. Why is he talking out loud? He's supposed to make sure no one sees him. Why would he not be invisible and inaudible when doing this? Ambrose sees him and gets upset, but thankfully it's actually for a smart reason because he thinks Hilda gets mad at people and zaps them a lot. He assumes that this is a regular guy Hilda shrunk instead of knowing that an elf of Santa's on site as a warlock. So he tries to use magic on him. But out of nowhere, even though the elf feels it and it hurts, nothing happens to him. I wish it was explained that Santa makes his elves and him immune to witchcraft in case a witch tries to hex them for intruding on their home, because that'd make him look smart and justify the story. The elf is rude to Ambrose and he apologizes to the elf and explains what he's trying to do. It's always been nice that the elf was in red instead of green for a change at least, even if it doesn't make as much sense to me. He hovers and says he's happy with the way he is. Ambrose says he can't go through life like that and uses magic on him again, which scares him into warping away. Somehow Ambrose thinks he did that to him and his spells are working backwards, instead of simply assuming that the funny dressed elf is a warlock. Thankfully, the elf does have a soft side. He tells Santa to be real nice to Sabrina because he has to put up with Ambrose. Too bad the story ends without us finding out what extra thing Santa was gonna do for her. That'd have been more effort to write. The first story made me feel sorry for Hilda for her idiot ball with Sabrina on Christmas when she was being unusually nice. The second story has Sabrina be unreasonably mean to Harvey about the right thing to like Christmas for, and then it turns out he's really generous at Christmas. Was too humble to tell her, and somehow Ambrose knows this out of nowhere, getting Sabrina to make it up to Harvey. So Sabrina was tedious. The third story has Sabrina get pelted with snow a lot. And I'm glad because I'm still mad at her for last story. The fourth story has Ambrose make a reasonable wrong assumption, but it's confusing that the elf's immune to his magic to help him because that's not explained. The worst part is it still hurts, so Ambrose ends up in the wrong.